So welcome to the webinar. This is our first webinar for the BC Community Gaming Grant in 2026. So I'm from BCACG. So BCACG, if you don't know us already, helps nonprofits in BC access the BC Community Gaming Grant and the BC Gaming Capital Project Grant. So if you need help with your gaming grant applications or have questions about the gaming grant guidelines, please get in touch. We host monthly webinar as well as online drop-in Q&A sessions regularly. So you can visit our website, bcacg.com, to see upcoming events. So today I am very happy to have Networking for Nonprofit Collagen to host this webinar for us. And also we have Amy Bond, Policy and Outreach Manager of the BC Community Gaming Branch here with us. So Amy will be taking us through the presentation, and we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. If you would like to ask your own question, you can wait until Amy's done with the presentation, or if you don't want to forget your question, on your panel there should be a question area that you can write your question into there, and we'll try our best to answer as many questions, or if not all the questions that is written there. Also, the 2026 BC Community Gaming Grant guidelines and today's presentation slides that Amy will be using is actually in the handout area of your panel. So you can download those two documents anytime during the 1.5 hours that we are doing this webinar. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Amy.
Great, thanks so much, Kalina. Thanks very much for inviting me here again this year, and I'm going to get going with the presentation. So that should be showing now. So we'll be going over the 2026 program grants intake, the highlights and key changes for the year. So an overview of what we're doing, we'll look at program essentials, just a broad overview of the Community Gaming Grants program. We're going to talk about what's new in the guidelines this year. We'll go over organization eligibility, so who can apply, program eligibility, what types of programs are funded, financial eligibility pieces, how to apply, going through the process, spending the grant once you've got it, follow-up reporting, and then we'll share some resources. Before I get started, Community Gaming Grants acknowledges with deep respect our work takes place across the unceded ancestral territories of First Nations throughout what is now known as British Columbia. We recognize that these lands have been cared for by Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We're committed to learning from and with the communities on whose territories we're privileged to work on. Our main office is located on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, known today as the Kosapsum and Songhees nations. We raise our hands to their ancestors, elders, knowledge keepers, and future generations. As a provincial grant program, we're actively working to build meaningful reciprocal relationships with Indigenous-led organizations. We understand that acknowledging territory is only one step in a broader journey of truth, accountability, and reconciliation. We're committed to reflecting on our responsibilities, examining the privileges we hold, and taking action to support Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. So I invite everyone here who engages with our program to consider, what does it mean to live and work on unceded land? And how can we move beyond acknowledgement toward justice and transformation? Okay, first we'll talk about what is new. New in 2026, we've made some clarifications to applicant and program eligibility. I would not classify these as policy changes. Just trying to clarify for applicants what some of these mean. So in section 3.2, we added some clarity about medical and healthcare facilities and other community facilities, which are not eligible only if they're operated or controlled by a level of government, recognizing that there are some nonprofit community facilities and healthcare facilities included. Section 3.3, we've provided additional transparency about extensions available to restricted funds timelines and addressing how bad faith transfers or restrictions may impact assessments. In section 4.2, we removed the term subsidized from housing programs as an ineligible program, just to clarify that market rentals are also not eligible for funding. Community Gaming Grants continues to fund short-term housing programs such as emergency shelters, transition housing, and that sort. In processes under section 4.3 for in-kind contributions, the options to present in-kind are now more flexible. So applicants may continue to include in-kind program actuals, or they may simply add the in-kind contributions for the summary for each program. I'm going to pause for a moment and see if everyone can see my screen. I just received communication that might not be coming through. I get a hand maybe, if you guys can see that.
Hi, Amy. This is Kalina. At the moment, I can see your screen. So yeah, maybe we would do just a quick check. I'm lowering everybody's hand right now. So we will start again here. If you can see Amy's screen, can you click the hand? Yes, I think we can see your screen, Amy. Okay. And if you can't see Amy's screen, maybe just go to your panel. There's a view option, and you should make sure that everything on your on the drop down under view is ticked so that you can see everything. Thank you, Amy.
Yep, I'm going to carry on then. Section 5.2 and 5.3. This is the same as last year, but just putting it out. Renewed funding is not available yet for the intake. We are working on getting that option back. All right, so program essentials. This is a bit of an overview of community gaming grants. The community gaming grants support community-driven programming. We're funded with commercial gaming revenue. So this is really about community programming, not government-identified initiatives. Our program actually replaced funding that groups used to earn at the community gaming facilities. So we have 3 program streams within community gaming grants. The biggest one is the program grants. So helping nonprofits deliver ongoing programs. That is our standard intake that runs throughout the year from February to the end of November. We also offer PAC and DPAC grants. So that's for parent advisory committees and the district parent advisory committees. We also have a capital projects grant intake that helps not-for-profits complete capital projects, facilities acquisitions, that kind of a thing. So our main program with our program grants and the PAC grants, it's not competitive. All eligible applicants will receive funding at some level. We had an 84% approval rating in the 2024-25 intake. And the average grant for that year was $34,500. So the program funds approximately 5,000 organizations all across BC. How the capital program differs from that is that one is a competitive grant process. And there's limited funding available for that. So that's the reason for it. Grants are between 20,000 up to 250 maximum. And applicants have to have matching funds when they apply for it. There is a separate program guide for this. So funding levels, program grants, we're funding based on the demonstrated size, scope, and community benefit of the programming as it's presented in the application through the program description and demonstrated financial need as shown in the program actual costs from the previous year. The funding is provided for each program applied for. It's not an overall operating grant. Local organizations, the maximum grant is $125,000. If the programming you deliver is regional or provincial in nature, you can have a grant of up to $250,000. Those are maximum limits. The PAC and DPAC grants are based $20 per student for PACs, and that's based on the registration at the beginning of the school year. When there's a minimum of $2,000, so if you have a very small school, you'll at least be guaranteed that amount. The district PACs have a flat fee of $2,500. Capital project grants will get funded at the requested amount or not, or no amount, so it won't be fluctuating between. The grant amount must be between 20 and 50% of the total projected cost of the project itself. Additional factors for all of the funding include overall demand and available funding. So it really depends on what the budget is for the program in a given year and how many other applicants we get. If you think that an error was made in the assessment of your application, your organization may request a reconsideration of the decision provided. A request must be received within 30 days of receiving the decision letter. There is now an online form for this to make it a bit easier. You should address the points in your decision letter that you disagree with when making a reconsideration. The purpose of the process is to correct human error. It's not an opportunity as a do-over for the grant or a chance to request a higher level of funding, unless, of course, there was a reason provided for the funding level being capped. The manager of reconsiderations will carefully review the original submission, the reconsideration request, and all available internal notes and files, and a final decision will be communicated within 90 days of receiving that request. Now we'll talk a little bit about who can apply for a grant. What is the eligibility criteria at an organization level? So to be eligible for a grant, an organization must be a not-for-profit. You don't have to be registered, but you do have to have those purposes. And you can't be registered as a for-profit business or something like that. Primary purpose, what we're looking for is that you operate for community benefit. So they'll look at your constitution or similar document for purposes. Organizations must deliver programs or services in their community. They must have an open membership, reasonably open. If there is a rationale between the primary purpose of an organization and a membership restriction, it may be allowed when there's a defensible rationale. So examples of that may be the group's primary purpose is to promote the interests and welfare of an identified group or class of people characterized by physical or mental disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity expression. And the organization grants preference to the member of this group in good faith, and there's a rational connection between the preference of their work, between the preference and the work or the purpose. So we see things like this. An example may be a group that is providing services to people with visual disabilities must have people with lived experience, having people who are blind on the board, coming up with those programs. Other eligibility criteria, you must have a volunteer board, so they're not paid for their role on the board of directors, and they have a voting membership that elects that board of directors. So we're looking for evidence of a democratic election of some type, and you must demonstrate financial need. We'll get into the financial criteria a bit later. The organization is not eligible for a grant if it is for profit, if it's a political party, action group, or lobby group, any level of government, federal, provincial, regional, municipal, First Nation, or any other kind of local government, or any of these government facilities. So that could be a hospital, could be a school, could be a municipal library or museum. If this is operated by a level of government, then it's not eligible. Member-funded societies. So this does not mean that you receive dues from your membership. This is a legal definition under the Societies Act. So under that act is ordinary societies and member-funded societies. This will say, if you're a registered society, this will say member-funded or not on your paperwork, so you can check with that. We also cannot fund professional or industry associations and religious institutions. So while religious institutions often operate as nonprofits in the sense that they're not generating a profit and may operate for community benefit, they're generally not eligible by default, as they typically do not have an elected board of directors or voting membership in the same way that other nonprofits have. But a nonprofit organization structured correctly that is affiliated with a religious institution may be eligible when they meet their eligibility requirements. All right, so we'll talk a bit about programs here. What types of programs are funded? So community gaming grant supports a wide range of unique programs. We go through the different sector intakes that we fund: arts and culture, sport, public safety, environmental, human social services. Is a huge range. So we try to keep things fairly general. The applications themselves should be submitted on a program basis, and we define a program as an ongoing service, activity, or series of activities. Program delivery, so eligible programs must be running at the time of the application. We don't provide seed funding or startup funding for something new. The program has to be ongoing, so not a project with a firm start and stop date, and it has to be directly delivered by the applicant. So a nonprofit can apply for programs they directly deliver. They can't apply for programs that are delivered by another organization, even if, perhaps they're partnering. If there are two or more groups that are delivering a program together in true partnership, you need to choose one who is the lead. And typically we'll look and see which organization is covering the costs for that. It's the easiest way to determine that. Programs also must demonstrate broad community benefit. So how is the program responsive to a community's needs? Is it accessible and inclusive? So no unnecessary restrictions. And it should provide an immediate direct service to the community. They should be able to see something reporting out within 12 months. Programs are not eligible if they're delivered on a contract or under a funding agreement. So community gaming grants isn't there to top up underfunded contracts. If a program solely operates a facility or a venue, again, we're looking at what activities are happening inside that facility. We want to fund the programming itself, not just keeping a building open. We don't fund programs that provide financial assistance to individuals. You can lower fees for all participants or things like that, but just rebates or things like that to individuals, we're not unable to fund. Vocational training is not eligible. If you have volunteers who are getting volunteer training, that's okay. But if you have paid staff who are getting trained, or if this is like an employment training program, we're not able to fund that. And there is other provincial funding programs out there for that we can refer you to. Again, we don't fund fundraising or social enterprise programs. that are geared to raise funds for your organization. We're more interested in what are you raising funds for? What is the activity that you're trying to do? We want to fund it directly. Selling tangible goods or food to participants is not an eligible program in itself. Again, this could be seen as fundraising or various things there, but if your program provides food or goods to participants at no fee, or perhaps there's optional donations, that's something that we may consider. Programs that primarily benefit other organizations are not eligible. So your program should be open to people in the community. We should see a direct impact to the community. And yeah, delivering a direct service to the community. Whoops, I'll just go back here. So that might be things like research, or there could be a benefit down the road, but it's not immediate or it's not direct. If you do have one of these food programs and you're not sure, please do reach out to myself if you need to discuss that. All right, so describing the program within the application. We need specific details for each program you apply for to know how to assess it. So there are dedicated fields within the application form now where you can provide the information that our grant analysts are looking for to best understand your program. I would say please answer the questions in the form to the best of your ability. You can provide statistics where it's relevant and available. Avoid technical information or industry-specific jargon. So the reviewer is seeking to understand the size and the scope of the program. How big is it? How many people are served or participate in it? And how much community support it receives? Let's try to stick to those questions on the screen there. Who, what, when, where, how. It's always a good idea to practice if you can, talk to a friend who doesn't work in your field, and if you can tell them about the program in 5 minutes or less. Try to do that to get a nice, succinct program description. Defining the program. So as mentioned, Community Gaming Grants is a program-based application form. Our updated forms are dynamic. They'll guide you through the process. You'll first have to decide how many programs that you're requesting funding for. If a single program is the only request, define if the activities represent the entire operations of your organization and confirm that all the activities are eligible for funding, or if it's a single but distinct program that funding is being requested for. Based on your selections and the initial information entered, the form will guide you down the correct pathway, prompting you for the required financial and descriptive information. So as an example, if your program has been operating for a full year or more, and the total amount requested is less than $10,000, you'll be presented with the option to use embedded simplified program financials. That option will not be presented if you don't qualify based on the information. You can apply for one overall program, one distinct, or you can apply for multiple distinct programs. And I'll just go through some examples with you here. So an example of if the organization's entire operations are one eligible program, we often see this with sport groups. So Sunshine Sports Society. Their programming is everything that the organization does. It's a season of play. So field rental, coach wages, equipment purchases, insurance. On the application form, this is what it would look like. They're selecting one program, and then in the drop-down, they can say equal to organization. Example 2, this organization delivers just one program, but a substantial amount of the operating expenses are not incurred for the delivery of that program. So they could be renting out a facility more than occasionally. They might have contracted activities, or they could be running a social enterprise, like a retail store on the side. So this is when we're going to say one eligible program has a distinct portion. So in this example, Sunshine Theatre Society, they have their theater program, which is a season of productions. So this could be, the rent for the theater, wages for their staff, materials for the different plays, promotions, advertising, everything to deliver this season of presentations to the community, but it's not going to include any costs around their facility rentals. Maybe they're renting out their theater about 40% of the time to other user groups, and they're earning revenue on that. So they're going to prorate out those operating costs and not include that. What that looks like on the application form, again, one program is what they're requesting, but on the second drop down, you choose distinct portion. Third example is if you have multiple programs that you want to apply for. So in this example, Sunshine Family Services has a youth and child program. They also offer seniors activities and outreach services. And then they also offer family and couples counseling. So 3 distinct programs aimed at different user groups, probably different staff, different budgets. So you can apply for all 3 of those. Each program will require separate program descriptions and separate program financial information. So if you enter more than one, how many programs are you requesting funding for? You'll get this grid here for a program summary. You can enter the program names, how long have the programs been operating, and how much are you requesting. This will update the form moving forward for you. So you'll be asked to provide information about each of those programs individually after this point. Okay, we'll move on to talk about our financial eligibility criteria now. And for that, there are 2 main policies for our financial criteria. One is at the organization level. So when we're assessing the applicant itself to see if the organization is eligible, we look at financial need. We call that the surplus policy in guideline 3, or a 50% policy. It looks at the ratio of available funds compared to the total expenses in the previous year. The second criteria is the program financial eligibility. So this calculates how much government funding supports each program that you apply for to ensure that only community programming is being funded. So we're not topping up any government programs, and it's not being funded over that limit. We're looking to see at least 25% community contributions at a program level. So I'll go into the surplus calculation here for the organization financial eligibility. So you may be temporarily ineligible to receive a grant if you have more than 50% of the previous year's expenses on hand as unrestricted funds. So here's the calculation that we use. We're looking at the balance sheet for this. I'll show an example in a moment. We'll say what is your available current assets and investments. We deduct gaming funds, deduct current liabilities, and deduct internally or externally restricted funds. This gets divided by the previous fiscal year's operating expenses to get to the surplus percentage. So you can restrict funds for this. I will note general purpose restrictions, contingency funds, or rainy day funds are not considered in this. There is more information in 3.3, and this is where we talk about, if you have to request an extension for how long you restrict funds. Typically, you can restrict funds internally for 5 years or up to 7 if it's for a major capital project. If there's a really good reason why you must restrict funds for longer than that, hang on to them. You can reach out to the branch. We can have that discussion. It does all need to be documented on your file. So in the example here, on the left, we'll see the balance sheet. They're looking under cash assets to identify how much cash do you have on hand in the bank, investments. That's where they get the first number. And then they look down at the liability side. So properly formatted balance sheet is really essential in us being able to do this calculation correctly. We're looking under liabilities to subtract things like restricted funds, like any accounts payable, accruals, deferred revenue as well. And then it gets divided over on the statement of revenue expenses or profit and loss sheet. We're looking at the total expenses here. So that's how that calculation is made. So I'll go to the program financial eligibility next. So this calculation is done for each program that is included in the application. So we look for program financial profit and loss or revenue and expense statements, actual revenues and expenses for the last fiscal year. Federal and provincial funding is what is considered as government, and it cannot exceed 75% of the total program cost. So the remaining 25% must come from community sources. So it could be user fees, fundraising, could also be your municipal, local, regional government, could be private funding or other grants. This could also be made up in-kind contributions. So we'll consider that. And I'll go on, I'll talk a bit more about in-kind contributions in a moment, things like volunteer labor. So your program revenue sources must be clearly identified. As you can see here, this is how they're doing the calculation. They're looking for federal or provincial funding. Community gaming grants are considered provincial. They'll add that up, and then that gets divided by the total program expenses. You see, if you do have in-kind there, it does increase that bottom line. And so simplified program financials, I mentioned those earlier. They may be available if you qualify. So if you have a total funding request of $10,000 or less, and the programs have been operating for more than 12 months, this can be considered. So these will be embedded into the application form. If you're eligible for it, it'll offer you this option. You can type the numbers into the fields instead of providing a separate formatted revenue and expense statement. You can just fill in the fields on the online form instead. So we're looking at the total program revenue, how much are you bringing in, the total program expenses, what are the costs for the year, and then for you to identify government funding on a line-by-line basis. It does also offer, if you want to attach in-kind contributions. So these are the fields that you'll be asked to fill out on the online form. And if you qualify for the simplified program level financials, we're also not requesting budgets. So it's quite streamlined if you choose that option. So in-kind, I mentioned a couple times here, in-kind support can be included. We'll accept it on a dollar value. This could be volunteer time, donated labor, donated equipment, services, or materials. So typically, most volunteer labor is calculated at $20 an hour. This is general things. If you have professional services, you can include those at market rate. It must be supported with an in-kind contribution summary. We do have an example of that on the website. We're looking for, what is the donation. If it's volunteer labor, you can say general volunteers, setting up and tearing down the event, $20 an hour times 5 people times 5 hours. And that comes out with a dollar value. What would you have paid if this had not been donated? So that's what that is and how it comes into play with the 25% of community contributions. This can be really helpful if your program has government funding making up a large portion of your program revenue. It's also a great way to show community support and investment as well. All right, so prorating operational cost programs. So when you apply, you're looking, what are your program costs? When you're including this in your program financial information, you want to make sure that you also include operating costs that are incurred to deliver that program. So this is going to be a percentage of your core operating costs, so wages, rent, utilities, things like that, administrative costs, if they're directly related to the program. So if you have, in this one example, if you have an employee that spends 40% of their time working on an eligible program, then include 40% of that employee's wages as the program expense. If you have a program that's running out of a facility, you can calculate how often it's running there and what are the costs incurred, what is that program's share of, say, the rent and the utilities. So in this, we'll go back to Sunshine Family Services as an example here. They have some core organization costs that they need just to run, professional fees, financial management, maybe legal fees, administration. They might have a program that's not eligible for funding, like maybe they do an annual gala fundraiser, but then here's their programs, program 1, 2, and 3 that they're applying for. Youth and child program, their seniors outreach, their counseling. So they're prorating a portion of their director's wage as a program expense for each of these. Same principle as applying to other core costs, rent, utilities, insurance, advertising, anything that is directly related to that program delivery of those programs we're funding. You're including that portion, as well as any other costs that are specific to those programs. So about the financial statements and your fiscal year end, when should you apply? So you must provide financials for the most recent fiscal year. So if the intake is close to your year end, plan to apply before your year end date. The budget is always for the current fiscal period, the year that you are in and the time that you apply. We use this financial information to calculate both the surplus and the government funding allowances. Staff do not use the budget to determine financial eligibility. So doing it this way provides a complete and accurate picture of your organization's financial position and needs. And the requirements don't change due to the timing of your year end so that all the applicants are being assessed equally. So here's some examples. In this example, the organization has 3 months after its fiscal year end to prepare financials before applying. Their intake is open February 1st to April 30th, and their year end is December 31st. We're hoping, get those financials done. If you don't have them back, if you say you're sending them to an auditor and they're not back, you can provide draft financials and then send us the audited copy later when they're ready. In the second example, this organization's year end is March 31st. Their intake is open between February 1st and April 30th. If they apply on April 1st, they only have 1 day after their fiscal year end to prepare financials. This will be difficult or possibly not impossible. So this organization would be encouraged to apply sooner, before their year end date. Even if they are providing, 11-month-old financial statements. And then in the last example, this group has 11 months after its fiscal year end. Their year end is March 31st, the same intake. They're going to apply March 1st. That's fine. Then they're providing the correct year financials and budget. How to apply this year. So we're going into our second year on the Unity Grant Management Platform. We learned a little bit from last year, so I'll provide some tips about that. Always recommend checking your program eligibility, looking at the guidelines to make sure that your organization and your program is eligible, especially if you're a first-time applicant. You want to do that before you begin. You want to check the intake dates. So look for the opening and closing dates for your sector. Mark it in your calendar. Have a BCEID ready. So the online applications can be submitted with either a basic or a business BCEID. Make sure you have that ready. Make sure that your staff has the sign-in information for it. If you need to update your password or do anything with BCEID, that may take a little while, so definitely check to make sure you can access it. Prepare your documents that you need for the application. Have your program descriptions and your financial documents ready. I always recommend save them in a folder on your desktop. You could call it, gaming grant folder. Make sure it's all there. We have an application checklist you can cross-check that with. And then apply online. So you can go onto our website, click the Apply Now button, and then follow the steps it pushes you through. If you have your file number, your LNG file number from applying in previous years, have that ready. It'll retrieve your account information. It does help with the online application. It'll return quite a bit of information at the beginning of the form. It'll auto-fill it for you. And then save and complete your application. So you can save your progress through the application. The save button is at the top right-hand part of the screen, so you may need to scroll up to click that, and it does say save the application. Once you're done, you can hit submit. You can also print a copy for your records. There's a button that says print to PDF, and that will create a PDF copy for you. There will only be one link to apply this year. The submission form is accepting both basic and BCEID. Available resources, I mentioned the pre-application checklist is on our website. This is under resources, on our resources page. We do have tutorial videos if you need a refresh or if it's your first time applying. And you can pause those and you can put on screen captions if you need that as well. We also have frequently asked questions document up on our website. So these are all available online, or of course you can call or email us as well. So my advice, look at the program guidelines, make sure you're applying for something eligible. Look at the pre-application checklist and get all your documents in order. We do also have example documents on our website. So financial statements, in-kind contribution summary, all of that we have example documents for. If you're not sure how to put something together, have a look at those and it should help you prepare your materials. If it's possible or relevant, have a professional review your financials, or at least someone with some bookkeeping background, just to make sure that they make sense and it's formatted correctly. And then, save all of this documentation on your desktop. We do appreciate if you can save things in Word, Excel, or PDF. Our team does work on Windows-based computers, so it is definitely easier to open file types that work with our computers. If relevant, address items from your previous year's notification letter. So look at your grant letter from last year and just double check before you apply. Was there anything that we asked for follow-up on? Was there any conditions attached? Did we ask for any additional information that you may need to provide? I also want to ensure that your gaming account summary reports are up to date. So double check that, make sure those have been submitted and you're up to date. You can contact the outreach manager, myself, if you need any assistance with difficult issues that have come up. you're unclear about the policy or how to move forward, reach out. And then finally, I always say apply as early as possible. So the way we process these applications are in the order that they're received. So as they come in during the year, we're processing them in that order. If you do wait until the last day or the last week of an intake to submit, your application will be looked at last. And just due to human nature, those ones in the last week or two do tend to bottleneck, so it can take a bit longer. If you apply early, you usually hear back much sooner. Okay, so now you've applied and you're successful. Your organization and your programs are eligible. You've got the money. What do you do with it? How do you spend it? So there are some policies around how you can spend grant funds. I will say it's fairly flexible. So eligible expenses include program, anything directly tied to running the program, and also some operating costs. So anything essential. You can also use funds for up to 15% of core operating costs that are not directly tied to the program you applied for. So definitely wages of any paid positions. That includes contractors you can pay, rent, utilities, insurance, any kind of program supplies, office supplies, communication, right? Any of your internet or phone costs, advertising, marketing. If you need to rent or purchase any specialized equipment to deliver the program, and then travel that's essential to program delivery within BC. If you need to travel outside of the province, there is a special request for that, not a province travel form. And that's just letting us know what the reason, how many people, and how much money will be used for that. Going on for eligible expenses, you can also request, in addition to your regular program funding, additional money for minor capital projects or acquisitions within your program application. So you should include these requests within the program area. Don't enter it as a separate program. Include it as in the use of funds and in the program description. Tell us what the reason is. Why is it essential to the program? Include the amount requested for the specific purchase in the use of funds field. You can't apply for minor capital projects or acquisitions on their own. It has to be tied to program delivery. And then clarifying the requirements around these, so both capital projects and acquisitions. If it requires a contractor to do an installation, or if the total cost is more than $5,000, we're asking for quotes to support those requests. If it's something that does not need a contractor and it's under $5,000, you don't need to worry about that. So spending timelines, grant funds must be spent within 12 months of receipt. Again, we're going back to this direct delivery into the community. We want to make sure that things are happening right away. You can also apply it going backward. Grant funds can back pay expenses that are incurred in the same fiscal year that your grant is received. You can't put it back for back pay from previous fiscal years, or that would be considered past debt, but if it's within that same fiscal year. You can do that by transferring funds from your gaming account to your general account. Make sure that you keep receipts for that. And so, yeah, you can't pay past debt or future costs. You can't prepay your rent for next year, or you can't pay costs from 2024. So the grant funds will be deposited into your organization's dedicated gaming account. We recommend, whenever possible, that eligible expenses are paid directly out of that account. If you need to transfer grant funds, you can do so by check or electronically into your other accounts for the reimbursement of eligible program costs. Don't transfer it before you've spent the money. It has to be for a reimbursement. And you can do that via check or a board-approved electronic transfer. Both of those need signatures from 2 board members. And then hang on to your invoices and receipts that back this up for up to 5 years, because it can be audited as well. So they're looking for dollar transactions for that. So financial reporting, how do you send your follow-up reports? All community gaming grant spending is reported in the gaming account summary report. So any organizations that receive a grant or have previously received a grant and still have money in their gaming account must submit one of these forms each year. So these are due within 90 days of your organization's fiscal year end. So when these come in will differ throughout the year for our branch, but we're looking, when you have your year end, consider this part of your year end paperwork. Make sure this form gets filled out and sent in to us within 3 months. You won't receive a reminder from our office, but we will let you know in your notification letter if you are late or outstanding on any of these. They're looking for some pretty basic details. So the opening balance at the beginning of your year, how much gaming funds were received, what went into the account, how the funds were dispersed, and the balance at the end of the year. There is also a section to capture if you used any of your grant funds for organization core costs, that up to 15%. And then it also requires a description of how the community benefited. I'll just show you an example here. It looks a bit like a tax form, but it's really more straightforward than it looks. We do have a tutorial and example documents on our website. We're looking at opening balance, how much went in. Down here is how much went out. And then the closing balance. It has to be signed by at least 2 board members who are responsible, including the treasurer. So give us a shout if you have any questions about that. Resources and contacts. Reach out to us at the Community Gaming Grants branch. Got our website up there in the PDF handout. These are hyperlinks. You can click on them and it will open right up. General questions, our email there, our phone number there. I've got the outreach email here if you need to reach myself directly. And again, you can also reach out to Kalina's team at the BCACG. Got their website and their email there as well. They do great work supporting nonprofits across the province, along with the community charitable gaming associations that are located throughout the regions, including Northeast, Central Okanagan, Fraser Valley, and here on the island. So again, we've got the websites there. You can reach out to them. Refer to your handout for that, and I'll just say thank you very much, everyone, for your attention.
So at this point, I just want to thank Amy, who, helped us understand the 2026 gaming grant a lot more, and is still working very hard to try and answer as many questions as possible. So again, if you want to follow up with your questions or have any additional questions, please feel free to contact the gaming branch. Amy, BCACG, and myself. BCACG have a dedicated email for you to ask question, which is gamingquestions@bcacg.com, and it will be in the follow-up email that you will be receiving. And again, we will endeavor to send out answers to some of the questions that has not been answered during this period. So thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah, thank you as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for everyone for coming.
And thank you everyone for coming. And I apologize that we cannot answer all the questions because some of the questions are still coming. But and thank you very much for your patience. And good luck to all of you in your application for the gaming grant. Thank you. Thanks, Amy. Bye.
Bye.